I watched David Lammy on Sky yesterday with Trevor Phillips. You probably saw it, where he was asked, isn't it a bit like a colony if you decide to recognise a state for which you only can suggest a government of one kind or another? He couldn't answer the question, are you only recognising it if it's got a government you like, or are you recognising it despite whatever government it's got?
Yeah, well, the whole thing is completely nonsensical. This state doesn't exist just because a number of countries, including apparently the United Kingdom government, wants it to exist, doesn't mean it becomes in existence. Certain conditions have to be met in terms of international law. They have not been met. Anybody with half a brain can see this thing doesn't exist. And the hapless Lammy, to whom you've just referred, on that very interview with Trevor Phillips, made a complete idiot of himself because he actually admitted that just recognizing a state of Palestine, he said, of course it doesn't bring it into existence. Well, if it's not in existence, then what are they recognizing?
Well, there's no logic, is there?
No, they're recognizing an idea. They're recognizing a wish. I mean, the whole thing is would be farcical, would be comical, were it not so serious. It is, as your viewers have just said, a reward for terrorism.
Yes.
Hamas has actually said, thank you. It has said, this is the fruits of October 7. Can you believe this? That Britain's Labour government under Sir Keir Starmer has delivered to Hamas a reward for the most barbaric and biggest single atrocity against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. What an appalling disgrace for a British Prime Minister.
Yeah, and what I've been saying this morning as well, it doesn't appear to have been any kind of public conversation about it. There's been no debate in Parliament, as far as I'm aware. I haven't really even read a piece written by a cabinet minister in defence of this particular position. There's been no intellectual conversation about it whatsoever.
Well, no, I think we can all see broadly what's happened. You know, Sir Keir Starmer under enormous pressure from the Gaza first tendency, which is growing, unfortunately. I mean, as if Gaza has anything to do with the interests of the British people, of whom he is the Prime Minister. But anyway, there's an enormous pressure on him personally from his hard left, who would depose him in a heartbeat over this. There's enormous pressure from the rising Muslim bloc, the rising power of the Muslim bloc, both inside the Labour Party and in the country. So those two things have been great pressure on him that has been building for some time. And I think that what possibly has spooked him completely into this precipitate action was Emmanuel Macron, the French president, saying that he was going to do this. And I think that probably Sir Keir Starmer thought, well, I'm going to be left, looking even more weak or I'm going to be in an even weaker position in terms of these people who want my head if I don't go along with this. Plus, I'm afraid to say, I think that Starmer himself, he's obsessed by what he calls the two-state solution, which involves a state of Palestine being created. And he believes that Israel is dragging its feet over this. Well, of course, Israel's dragging its feet over this. There cannot be a state of Palestine because the only purpose of such a state, as the Palestinian leadership has said time and again, often in Arabic, but it is said time and again, the only purpose is a stage. It's part of what they call a strategy of stages to destroy Israel. I mean, I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, just sort of down the road, sort of between you and sort of Kilburn, as it were, or, Primrose Hill, is the area which would be designated as part of Palestine, from which it is eminently possible to fire missiles straight at the Israeli capital, straight at Ben Gurion Airport, straight at most of Israel. Indeed, a missile attack was thwarted from those areas in the last few days. A missile attack. Can you imagine a missile being fired at you where you're sitting from, say, Primrose Hill? Yeah. That's what's being faced here now. That's what Keir Starmer wants to bring into existence permanently. What is the man thinking of? Right. He is either delusional or he's evil.
Right. And certainly it would appear that he doesn't understand the region either, because there's nobody in Palestine who wants a two-state solution. As you say, they're not interested in a two-state solution. So these kind of, do-gooders in the West who say, oh, the two-state solution must be the way forward. Well, nobody wants it.
No, the only people who want it are the people who want Israel gone, and it's being used. This whole thing of Palestine recognition, which is now running across the world in country after country, has been is part of a really wildly successful campaign of demonization and delegitimization of Israel going on for many years now, spearheaded by the Palestinian Authority, probably backed by other countries such as, for example, Iran, which has the same kind of aim in mind. But certainly the Palestinian Authority has been going on about this, this tack for a very long time. In other words, the Palestinian Authority long ago decided that it could not defeat Israel by conventional military means, and it probably couldn't defeat it by terrorism, although it's having a good go at it the whole time. And every day there are attacks and thwarted attacks going on. So the Palestinian Authority decided that it could achieve its ends through the diplomatic route. It understood that there was a weakness in the West. They hate Israel. They don't like the Jews, and it could play on that. And it could play on international law, which is regarded in the West as a kind of religion. Sir Keir Starmer is, above all, a human rights lawyer. And the Palestinian Authority understood that they could deploy this. They could deploy it through the UN, which is run by or answerable to countries which want Israel gone, and through the UN, which purports to be, you know, the global arbiter of peace and justice, for goodness sake. It's the opposite. It is institutionally programmed to Israel's destruction. And through its satellite agencies, its courts, its whole humanitarian apparatus, the Palestinian Authority has been using that. And recognition of Palestine is a kind of super mega stunt in order to plant in people's minds the idea that there is a state of Palestine, there should be a state of Palestine, and that the only people who are stopping this worthy endeavor is the state of Israel. But the state of Palestine has one purpose only, genocidal, to destroy Israel, to exterminate Jews. And that is what Sir Keir Starmer has now put Britain's shoulder behind. And I'm not surprised that the majority of British people, according to a recent opinion poll, it said 90% of the British people think this is the wrong move at this time to recognize a state of Palestine without conditions, leaving Hamas in power in Gaza without a single hostage being returned, removing any leverage there is over Hamas to end the war, to get rid of all its weapons, to disarm, and to remove and to restore the hostages to Israel. It's removed that leverage, so it's not surprising that the British people, who understand humbug when they see it and have a moral sense, are disgusted by this. And that's what Sir Keir Starmer has done. I don't think, you know, if he thinks he's bought himself out of a problem, I think he's actually going to find that he's managed to secure a much bigger problem for himself.
Yes, I think so. Melanie, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Melanie Phillips there, talking to us from Jerusalem.
I think we've had a pretty busy weekend in the royal watching community.
Yes, you absolutely have. I mean, they're on the front pages again, Andrew and Fergie together. A picture of Andrew looking very stern. I think the picture's actually from the Duchess of Kent's funeral. But will Fergie's Epstein emails allow Charles to finally exile the Yorks? It doesn't look great, does it, this email exchange that she seems to have had?
It doesn't. And over the weekend, the Daily Beast talked to Andrew Loney, who wrote that recent book about Prince Andrew. And Andrew says that he feels that it was more than £15,000 that Fergie actually borrowed from Epstein. He said it's more along the lines of £2 million that Fergie borrowed from Epstein, which would justify some of those overly gushy, gooey sentences in that apology email. I mean, 15,000, you know, but 2 million. Yeah, you're going to have to do some begging and some, you know, begging for forgiveness and some sucking up.
I mean, the problem for her, of course, is 15,000 doesn't go very far in the world of Fergie. And there was some suggestion, was there not, that one of the things that they used his money for was to secure the ski lodge somewhere in Switzerland, and which would have cost an awful lot more than 15 grand, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I just think that this should be the final straw for King Charles. Will he do it? I don't know. In my opinion, we've seen a bit of weakness in him in the form of a 54-minute tea with Prince Harry. I would love to see him put his foot down and be more firm when it comes to the Duke and Duchess of York. However, you know, there was a lot of criticism about their appearance at the Duchess of Kent's funeral.
Yeah.
You know, I knew people inside. They said audible gasps when they walked in the room at the funeral, that a lot of people couldn't believe they were there. But again, that would have been under the category of a family event. So normally they would be welcomed at something like that. It's royal events where they seem to be in timeout.
Yes. I mean, a couple of the quotes here will put everybody's minds, I'm sure, in the right place. You have always been a steadfast, generous and supreme friend to me and my family. And then she talks about how can I thank you enough? You are a friend indeed, and I will one day give it you back. But I cannot have the words to thank you now. And she calls him her dear, dear friend, Jeffrey.
It doesn't look great, Mike. It does not look good at all, especially when we saw a few weeks ago, thanks to other Epstein emails, that Prince Andrew did not break off their friendship at the point in time that he told the BBC that they did. Obviously, these two look very dishonest. They look like opportunists, and they look greedy and vulgar.
Yeah, which is surprising, really, because that's not what they are, is it? Nothing could be further from the truth. Greedy and vulgar. I mean, you know, it looks as though now they're going to be told to stay away from public events, because I don't know if you saw, there was another bit of footage of Andrew standing next to Prince William at that funeral and making some kind of what was clearly meant to be some kind of funny remarks to William, and William just completely blanks him.
Oh yeah, I mean that video have gone any more viral?
Yeah.
With poor Prince William looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world, but standing next to Prince Andrew. One of the journalists at Marie Claire wrote, if the pointed non-reaction is considered an art, Prince William has officially perfected it regarding that video.
Absolutely, and they're likely now going to be told to stay away from Christmas at Sandringham, because one of the things I remember that happened was there was a bit of a softening towards Andrew and Fergie, wasn't there, after the Duke of Edinburgh died, Prince Philip, because he was thought to be the one that really couldn't stand her, and after he passed away, the suggestion was that she might be welcomed back into the big house, because she'd always been left at the bottom of the road. But it looks like it's back to the bottom of the road for them, and maybe not even anywhere near the estate.
I mean, this is the consequences of their own actions.
Yeah.
I wish that I could say anything to defend them, but they have been troublemakers for decades now, and really are such liabilities when it comes to the future of the British royal family. And if they had any, you know, pride or dignity whatsoever, I think they would just disappear.
Right.
But they're refusal to quietly go away, it just shows you the arrogance we're dealing with. And if I were in your position, I wouldn't want those people representing my country as members of the British monarchy.
Definitely not. Similar things being written this morning about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They made a surprise appearance in Santa Barbara with, was it Kevin Costner's estate it was all going on?
So this is an event that they do every year, and it is for the firefighters in the area, in the Santa Barbara area. Last year, Meghan didn't attend, and Prince Harry attended solo. And it was interesting because the year before that, they did attend together.
Right.
And there was this extremely awkward moment on the stage where Meghan almost played tug-of-war with a woman for a microphone. So Meghan did not... she didn't take the stage, and like she didn't have the presence that she did that first year where we saw her kind of take the microphone from a woman that didn't want to give her the microphone. It's clear if you're there that Prince Harry is who they want to be dealing with,
right.
That Prince Harry is who they want on the stage, Prince Harry who they want fronting all of this. And so that first year, I think Meghan embarrassed herself. Maybe that's why she didn't show up the second year, and this year she kind of sat back and let Prince Harry take the stage and do his thing. But you're right, Rob Lowe was there, Oprah Winfrey was there. I don't think we saw Oprah and Harry and Meghan engaging with each other. We haven't seen them engage with each other in a while,
Right.
if I'm being honest with you. But, you know, I'm not going to criticize them for doing a little charity. When they stepped down as working members of the British royal family, they promised to live a life of service. And I'm glad we've seen the 1% of it here, of their life of service, the one charity event I've seen Meghan Markle at in like over a year.
Right.
Thanks, Meghan.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much indeed. Maybe she could give us a few more recipes of things that she's never cooked before for the first time. Here I am trying to cook something. You should try it too. OK, then. Meanwhile, he's being told that he can't have it both ways, as ever, because he's done that thing where he came here, and I watched you on, I think it was Jeremy's show last week, talking about how maybe they tested him to see what he would do after meeting his father, and he pretty much spilled his guts on everything that happened there. But they've said to him, no, you can't just keep coming in and out and being half in, half out. You know, if you want to come back, fine, but, you know, you can't just pretend you want to come back every now and again and take part.
Well, I think what infuriated most of us was this headline from the Daily Mail over the weekend. It was King and Harry to meet regularly as royal aides plan show of unity. And the idea in that article was that they could potentially, it sounded like, be doing royal engagements together. And if you are a regular royal watcher and a supporter of this monarchy, you think, well, wouldn't it be more beneficial for the king to be seen with his heir?
Yeah.
The young man that's going to take over for him one day, isn't that more important, that united front, and to show Prince William the ropes? But then Rebecca English swoops right in and says, not so fast, in the same publication, the Daily Mail, and says, pump the brakes here. My palace sources say absolutely not. And this is all Sussex propaganda. I think the ultimate objective is for Prince Harry to improve his public image. But there were also reports coming out of the Daily Beast over the weekend that while Harry was in town, he signed Archie up for Eton. I have heard from several people that Archie was talking about wanting his children to go to school in the UK while he was there. So could the ultimate objective be to move the family back, or to move his children back? And he's trying to make nice with the public because he wants to do that. Either way, I think he's a totally self-consumed individual, and I don't think that there's any benefit to the royal family to bring him back into the fold.
Yeah, I know. Extraordinary stuff. Let me just, before I leave you, just get your view of that extraordinary speech by Erica Kirk last night in Arizona, where she said she forgave the killer of her husband, and what an extraordinary event as well. Thousands and thousands of people, the president flying in for Elon Musk was there, J.D. Vance. Very emotional stuff.
It was beautiful. Charlie was my friend, and I've never been more proud of him, to see all those people standing up and to testify about the person he was, and to acknowledge how many people he's brought to Christ throughout this horrible event. Erica is the most beautiful woman, and talking about how faith is a constant practice that you have to do, and obviously saying that she forgave the killer. She's going to change a lot of people's hearts and minds. And you know what annoyed me about that? When Trump got up and said that he doesn't like his enemies, and looked over at Erica and said, maybe you'll need to counsel me. He was joking. It was a light moment. And I've seen so many people like Christians, this is your leader. He has a great sense of humor, and he was trying to have a light moment there. So I wish people would just be kind.
They can't, though, can they? They can't help themselves. They have to find something that they can just scratch away at and niggle at. They can't believe that ordinary, good, God-fearing Americans can actually like Donald Trump and actually quite enjoy his, sometimes slightly quirky sense of humour, sometimes slightly off, but he gets away with it because he's who he is.
They voted for him, so they know exactly what they're getting.
This is a pretty bad day for Fergie, isn't it? I mean, after all of the various scandals she's been involved in, going all the way back to Johnny Bryan and the toe-sucking and all the rest of it with Prince Andrew and the divorce and everything else that's been going on. I mean, this is about as bad as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worse than as bad as it gets. It's shocking, actually. When you read what's happened, it's turns your stomach because one time she says, "Oh, I really, you're the best friend. What is it? You know, you're
Supreme
such a good
friend.
friend to me. Thank you very much. Steadfast, generous, and supreme friend." And that's just a little bit after she said she would have no more contact with
Yes.
him. So that's the worst thing, isn't it? When you actually know you're doing completely wrong.
Yeah.
And especially that she's done a lot of work with children and things like that. And your stomach sort of goes, doesn't it?
It really does. And there's pictures of her today in the Mail with very, very close relationships with some of Jeffrey Epstein's employees. They've got a smiling justice posing with Jojo Fontanilla, who is Epstein's driver, and Junlin Fontanilla, his housekeeper, at his New York mansion. The pictures were posted on Facebook in 2010, but could have been taken earlier. One commentator posted under the images, "Wow, you're in the company of royalty." Some suggestions as well by the author Andrew Lowney that she didn't just borrow £15,000 from him; she borrowed £2 million.
Oh, really? That's just dreadful.
Yeah.
Well, she was owing £5 million. She was so out of money that she was desperate, and that's how she stayed with him for a while, because she knew that she would do anything to get the money. This is the second time she has been had no money twice, and actually doesn't give a very good impression to her children.
It really doesn't. And they've got a rather curious situation, haven't they, where Prince Andrew and Fergie share the same house in that lodge on the Windsor estate.
Yes.
And they don't apparently share a room. They have separate rooms, but there's 30-odd rooms in the place. I mean, the question on the front of the Daily Mail is, will the King now banish her? Do you think he might?
Well, yes, I do think so, because he's really wanted to get rid of Andrew because it's a huge house and he hasn't looked after it.
Right.
And apparently she has been providing all the money because he's actually pretty broke as well, and he can't get people to give him work. Quite rightly so, I think. And so it's going to be very difficult for them to keep up anything there. And so this is King Charles's opportunity to move them out. I don't see why they're there anyway, because neither of the children want to stay there either.
Right.
So you've got this enormous building that actually is full of nothing.
Right. Where would they go, though?
Well, they could go to the one that Harry and Meghan had, a small place with sort of 3 or 4 bedrooms.
Frogmore.
Yes. And they could have that. I mean, King Charles has actually asked them several times if they'd do that. But Andrew thinks it's demeaning.
Right.
Well, this is more demeaning, isn't it, by a long way?
Well, it's bad enough to have him scandal-ridden, but now she's scandal-ridden. I mean, to have 7 charities drop her on the very same afternoon, it's pretty awful.
Shall I read them? There's the Teenage
Yes.
Trust, British Heart Foundation, Julia's House, which is a children's hospice, Children's Literary Charity, Prevent Breast Cancer. Yes, that's it. No, National Foundation for Retired Service Animals.
Yeah.
These are all the things that she's been a patron of. Well, you can't have that because it just makes the whole place stink, doesn't it?
Well, exactly.
You can't have someone like that who's saying how glorious this man was. You can't do it. But the other thing that's very interesting is that Prince Philip wouldn't have her anywhere near them.
No.
Christmas, Easter, he just refused it. Whereas the late Queen actually quite liked her because she's jolly and laughable and all that. But he was right. Absolutely.
Right.
For over 20 years, she couldn't come on Christmas or Easter, and she had to stay away where the children could come, but not her. And now, once he had died, the late Queen invited her because she felt sorry for her.
Right.
I think that was going to end now.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be a sort of sandring of this Christmas, are they?
Yeah.
think it's going to be pretty awful. It's all very embarrassing. Angela, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Angela Levin, their royal biographer, about the embarrassment of Fergie, who's on the front pages this morning because 7 separate charities have basically axed her and their connection with her because of her emails to Jeffrey Epstein. It puts further pressure on the King to expunge Sarah Ferguson, it says here in the Mail, and her ex-husband from even private family events, and finally find a way to evict them from Royal Lodge. She describes Epstein as a supreme friend. She humbly apologised for an interview in which she disowned him after a £15,000 loan he gave her came to light, which we don't think she ever actually paid back, by the way. But as I say, others think that perhaps the money that he got to give her was even more than £15,000, and according to Andrew Lowney, who's writing in the Mail today, it could be as much as £2 million that he was giving her. Absolutely extraordinary. Another interesting week in the dangerous world of international politics. I've got Keir Starmer this morning asking for people in Palestine to stop rewarding other people in Palestine for killing Israelis, and saying basically what they should do is stop this, what do you call it, pay to slay policy, where you hand out stipends to the families of martyrs killed for attacks on Israelis. You think he might have thought of that before he decided to grant, nation status to Palestine?
Yeah, this is always going to be a big controversy for Sir Keir Starmer. And I thought one of the interesting things, actually, with such a prominent announcement, that he didn't actually go to the United Nations himself. Now, he gets criticised for when he goes abroad. He's not at home dealing with domestic issues. But you would have wondered, with Donald Trump at the United Nations today, Emmanuel Macron making his big announcement on Palestine, that whether it was Sir Keir who should have gone himself. And instead, he just delivered this social media message. Now, there was lots in the build-up. He obviously mentioned it at Chequers last week when he was with the US president. But you just wonder whether this was the moment when a British Prime Minister should have gone to the United Nations to explain and give reasons for the decision. But he didn't. He decided to stay here, and he has his own reasons for that. But you just wondered whether that was the right moment to actually step up.
A lot of people being critical as well of the fact that he announced it on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, which of course is the Jewish New Year, and he then put out a tweet yesterday wishing everybody a very joyous and happy New Year to the Jews of Britain. I think many of them took that the wrong way.
Yeah, no, you look at the reaction from that sort of social media post and the video, and just the way that that he's gone about it. Just reading comments from those who are criticising it, saying that the move was tone deaf, it was hypocritical, and he seems to have come in for a lot of attacks on that. So you just wonder whether he could have held a press conference, he could have fronted up a little bit more, especially when that announcement was actually made. So. As it's been a difficult few weeks for Sir Keir Starmer, whether you look at Angela Rayner, Peter Mandelson decision, the sacking there, and this is just another sort of row that he sort of waded himself into.
Well, he does seem to have done, doesn't he? And also, people were saying to me yesterday there wasn't really any public discourse around this decision. There was no conversation in Parliament, as far as we could see. There was not really any conversations in the media about it. You didn't see cabinet ministers writing pieces for newspapers at all. You didn't see really any kind of conversation around this attempt, this manoeuvre. He just kind of announced it, and people feel as though they haven't really discussed it.
Yeah, no, also, now I think the timing of it was that, 6 weeks ago, the government set out that it would always happen in and around the United Nations General Assembly week, which is this week. Yeah. But the thing is, Parliament is not sitting this week. So you just wonder whether they could have done something last week where ministers, the Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister would have been accountable to MPs. But just by the sheer timing of it, it is slightly... It means MPs won't be able to question it until they come back in a few weeks' time after the party conferences.
Yes, exactly right. Meanwhile, there's this other story that popped up at the weekend, which isn't really going away, and this is this thing about the £700,000 of donations, which was made to something called Labour Together, the think tank, which was run by Morgan McSweeney, and it was kind of being used, it would appear, as a sort of a fundraising arm for Keir Starmer's leadership bid, right? But it seems as though there's a bit of jiggery-pokery and certainly some possible criminal activity going on. Obviously, we don't know that yet, but certainly it would appear that some of this money has been hidden from scrutiny. Yeah,
no, it seems like Labour together received some fines, or from the Electoral Commission, overpayments. Now, I think the interesting thing is that obviously this organisation was run by Morgan McSweeney. Obviously, he's now the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. I think the questions have been raised over what sort of polling or help or assistance or jobs were handed to Sir Keir Starmer in terms of what sort of assistance he got, and was that actually declared properly? Now, I get the impression, I think Downing Street have commented on this, saying obviously there was nothing untoward that actually took place. But the Conservatives are really going for this. I think they smell a weak point here. And Morgan McSweeney, he's obviously been in the line of fire over recent weeks. He was very, very close to Peter Mandelson. We understand that he was pushing for him to actually get that job in Washington, but before he was sacked. But I think the Tories smell blood here, and it'd be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming days.
Yeah, absolutely right. And meanwhile, you've got Rachel Reeves this morning on the front pages looking at still more reasons to try and raise money. And we'll talk about Nigel Farage in a minute, his press conference yesterday. But she's been told to launch a tax raid on pensioners. There seems to be even more of a close connection now between the Resolution Foundation, which is a think tank very much on the left side of Labour's kind of spectrum, if you want, an awful lot of worries from people who have got pensions, worries from people who have got businesses, concerns that income tax could be going up 2p in the pound. There's a lot of things for people to be concerned about.
Yeah, I think one of the key things for people to watch out for as we come to that budget at the end of November is the Treasury will not say anything on the record when it comes to tax. They will not even venture there. The thing to watch is all these sort of left-wing think tanks, all these groups that are coming up with ideas. Now, this one, the Resolution Foundation, has very, very close ties with Torsten Bell, who is now a Treasury Minister.
Right.
He was their chief executive for many, many years, only stepped down when he got his parliamentary seat last year. So these are the kind of ideas. Now, they may not be entertained by the Treasury, but they are coming up with these ideas, and these are the sort of ideas that Treasury ministers look at, because when you've got a financial black hole of 30, 35, 40 billion pound that needs filling, you are looking for ideas of how to fill this. And this is just one such idea where there will be a 2p switch from national insurance to income tax. Now, obviously, the Labour government and the Treasury were very, very keen last night to point out that they are not going to break their election promises, which were they were not going to raise national insurance, VAT, or income tax. So, but let's just see where maybe this one may not fly, but let's just see what other ideas the Resolution Foundation come up with and see what Treasury ministers are listening to, because they've got a big financial black hole to fill.
Sure. And we know that they're very nervous about reform. They're constantly going on about reform. They're trying to attack them at every sort of opportunity. What's been the reaction in Downing Street to Nigel Farage's press conference yesterday, in which he said he wanted to ban all foreign nationals from claiming benefits, scrapping permanent residency rights, that he says will save Britain from bankruptcy? Yeah,
no, I thought it was very, very interesting yesterday. When Nigel Farage sat down at that press conference after that finish, it didn't take too long for the Labour Party chair, Anna Turley, to say, "Oh, this policy, is falling apart. It's sort of dead on arrival." Darren Jones talking about the sort of savings that Reform said they will make from their immigration shake-up, which was about 230 billion pounds. Darren Jones, now chief sort of secretary to the Prime Minister, the sort of de facto Deputy Prime Minister, said that these sums were drawn up on the back of a fag packet. So I think what you're going to see is Reform, as they come up with more and more detailed policy, that they are really going to come under the spotlight, not only from Labour and the Conservatives, but also from the media, who are going to be scrutinising all those policies, because if they want to be lining up to be the next government, that their policies and their costings will have to stand up to scrutiny. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting couple of years for Reform. And, let's see how they handle it under the spotlight. But I was at the press conference yesterday, and they were very steadfast on their policies. No benefits for overseas workers who come here, the scrapping of indefinite leave to remain, and having that rolling 5-year visa that will come in. It's headline grabbing, but let's just watch the detail. Let's have a look at that.
Okay. Bit of breaking news for you. Carmaker Jaguar Land Rover has just announced it's going to extend its pause in production until October the 1st as it recovers from that cyber attack which took place some weeks ago. It brings me to ask the question whether or not any of the sort of tariff arguments that are still hanging about in the air have been sorted out yet, because I think there's still, if I'm not mistaken, a tariff on British cars going into the United States of America. Has anything changed there?
No, we thought there'd be some big changes when Donald Trump came over for the state visit. We thought that, it'd been promised for a long time that those tariffs would go down to zero when it came to steel, but it hasn't. But this is causing massive problems on one level for companies like Jaguar Land Rover, and with this cyber attack. It causes all a host of problems. You just compare it to, what happened to Marks and Spencer's, where it took them several months to get back up and running again. So this is just one extra burden that businesses such as Jaguar Land Rover just don't need when trading conditions are particularly tough anyway.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, they almost kiboshed their own brand, didn't they, by coming out with all that rubbish about, changing the logo and changing the way it looks and all the rest of it. And now they're just not making cars at all. I mean, it's almost like they're trying to deliberately, destroy their own company. Yeah,
no, that's right. And I think one of the things for a lot of car companies who are sending all their products to America, it's just, how do they try and make money? It's been very, very difficult. Do they ship all these cars over to America? There was, problems over whether or not the tariffs would be in place by the time they actually got to America or not. So I think for the last sort of 6-7 months or so, ever since we saw those Liberation Day tariffs being brought in by Donald Trump, it's been particularly difficult. And this government has come under major criticism because they said that the steel tariffs would be reduced to zero, and that has just not happened.
No, and that is the problem. So the deal is still not quite the deal that everybody was sold. And this is the latest instalment in more trouble for Keir Starmer. And this, of course, is the donations row. £740,000 was given to an organisation which is called Labour Together, right? This is a sort of a think tank that's behind Morgan McSweeney's movement to get Keir Starmer into power, right? Yeah. And they borrowed or were loaned £740,000. But they hid the donations and didn't declare them, which technically could be a crime, certainly a breach of Electoral Commission rules. The Tory party yesterday, we spoke to Kevin Hollinbrake, came on and said he's actually asking the police to investigate. Yeah. He's asking the Electoral Commission to investigate. He's also asking the parliamentary standards to investigate. It turns out now there's an email in which a top Labour lawyer advised Keir Starmer's chief of staff, i.e. Morgan McSweeney, to hide the donations and say it was an admin error.
Yes, and that's because, of course, Morgan McSweeney had made the claim, according to the front page of the Daily Mail, that he'd been told that the donations totalling £739,492 didn't have to be declared. So the lawyer writes to him and says, well, wait, can you substantiate that, please? And, of course, he was unable to substantiate it. So he said, well, why don't you, you've got to say it's an admin error, try and pass this off as that.
And this is after the fact, right? So this is after they basically decided to hide the donation. He's now looking for a reason to justify hiding the donation.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, essentially. And what you have to understand about Morgan McSweeney is that he's absolutely critical to the Keir Starmer project. It doesn't happen without Morgan McSweeney. Right. He picked Keir Starmer. Right. Usually what many of your listeners would think was that you would end up in a situation where if you have somebody who wants to be Prime Minister, they go around and they handpick their staff.
They pick their own team.
They go, right, I'm going to have you to do the communications, you can do the paper clips, you can do... That's how you'd think it was. Right. This happened the reverse way round. What happened was that you had Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party, this is going back to 2017, 2018, and
running it into the ground.
Running the party into the ground, and Morgan McSweeney's there with a group of sort of like-minded guys who think, well, actually, this can't go on forever, and there's going to be life after Jeremy Corbyn.
Do you think, and I'll ask you, because I think you've explained this to us before, and I'm not saying don't do it again, but do you think there was likely to be people who had known McSweeney from the Blair government in this group of people, like, for example, Peter Mandelson, possibly Tony Blair, and others?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, it's
saying, you know, Starmer's your man.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he came to the conclusion that he had to take somebody from the front bench, right? So he looks around and he basically lumps with Keir Starmer. Yeah, I think he would be taking advice from all sorts of people. I think, you know, there's nothing yet to say, well, Peter Mandelson advised this or Tony Blair advised that, but absolutely he'd be taking advice from the great and the good within the Labour Party about who was most able and capable to lead the Labour Party after Jeremy Corbyn, and they came across Keir Starmer, and that's why if you take Morgan McSweeney out of the equation, and it's looking pretty dicey for him at the moment. If you take him out of the equation, it's very likely that in quite short order, and as Dan Hodges, who I know appears on this programme, has put in on page 4 of the Mail, that actually Keir Starmer goes shortly afterwards because he
has no project manager, effectively, right?
But he has no project. It's worse than that. It's not his project. It's not his idea. It's not his grand plan. It's Morgan McSweeney's.
Right.
So it's not even that he loses his chief of staff and he's going, okay, I've still got this great idea. I'm going to bring in somebody else to do it. The whole project belongs to Morgan McSweeney.
Right.
And that's why if you take him out of it, Keir Starmer's there without any ideas.
There is no project.
And that's
of course, this is why politics is so fascinating in so many ways, because in any other situation, McSweeney might survive this. However, he's already holed below the waterline because of Peter Mandelson, because it was his advice that got Mandelson the job as ambassador. It was he who insisted on him getting it over and above other suggestions, and it was he who told Keir Starmer to defend him when the story first broke that he got these email connections.
And it didn't go over to the Foreign Office. And the Foreign Office issues a statement saying, well, no, we didn't do the right checks. The other key ally that he's lost, and you know, Morgan McSweeney is now more isolated, is because, of course, he 10 days ago or so, he lost Paul Ovenden, who was his director of strategy, who's effectively his number two.
So he's lost him. It also says in this piece in the Mail, in September 2021, the Electoral Commission found more than 20 donation law breaches by Labour together and fined them 14,250. They'd explicitly told McSweeney in 2017 that he had to declare donations within a 30-day limit, and he didn't do it. So how can he say it was an admin error? He was told to do it, he didn't do it. That seems to me to be a breach of the rules, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be...
cut and dried. Sorry. Guilty as charged, I say.
You know, if it goes to, you know, Kevin Hollinrake, I think he was saying on your programme, right?
Yeah.
You know, he wants it to go to the police. That's serious.
Well, he's written a letter in which he says, in the letter, in writing, this could be possibly a crime.
Yeah, and if it goes and if it goes all the way, you know, if the police start investigating, it's very difficult to see how, you know, they just judge that there's an investigation. How you can have the chief of staff to the Prime Minister in Number 10, working in Number 10, working for the Prime Minister, at the same time as there is an
Well, let me take you back to the police investigation into the Downing Street parties. Remember that?
Yeah.
And people were falling down by the wayside because there was a police investigation before the result of that investigation had been finished. Because surely, if you're in the middle of a police investigation and you're supposed to be the chief advisor to the Prime Minister, you have to surely take yourself out of that job, don't you?
Yeah, and as you say, many of the aides to Boris Johnson,
isn't it? See the old project collapsing. Oh, happy days. You know,
I get the feeling you're revelling in it.
Well, yeah, I am, because they think they're so clever. They think they're so superior. Let's not forget, this is a government that came in saying that they were going to raise the bar on public service. They were going to be a government of service. They were going to put country first, party second. They were not going to have sleaze. They were not going to have anything dishonest. They were going to be transparent. All of the things that they said they were going to be. We didn't ask them to say all those things. They volunteered them. And now they have been proven to be complete liars, shysters, crooks and scumbags. There you go. There's a soundbite for the morning. That's the government. That's what they are. It's hard to disagree, isn't it? You got your speechless again, haven't I?
Yeah. It's only 13 minutes past 6. Like, it usually happens towards closer to 7 a.m.
But it's, you know, it's none of the things I've just said are untrue, are they? I mean, you can say there might be individuals in the government who are not like that, but I don't know who they are, because they're all in on it. aren't they?
I think. Look.
5,
things are.
4. I'll give you a countdown. 3.
Give me a countdown to come up with the answer. Look, there are obviously people in the government who have integrity, who want the best for this country.
Oh, yeah? Which ones are they then? David Lammy. He's given away the Chagos Islands and made us pay for them.
Yeah,
right. So he hasn't really helped us out much. He's also threatened to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. He told us that recognising Palestine is a great idea, even though...
OK, not
Lammy then.
Not
all right.
Lammy.
Rachel Reeves? She's gone after pensioners,
No.
So not her then. Who else we got? Oh, yeah, Bridget Phillipson, yeah. Destroying the education system in this country, making people who've earned, worked hard for all their lives to make them put their children who've got special needs out of a special needs school because she just doesn't like them. So it's not her then.
No.
Anyone
OK,
else?
look, can we do...
Should we move on to Trump?
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, you've just been at Lib Dem conference.
No, I've just been at Lib Dem conference.
Why don't we talk about that? Ed Davey, we'll give him some more time. Ed Davey's obsessed with Nigel Farage. This is his keynote speech. Have a look.
Farage, Nigel Farage. Give Farage so much time and attention. Farage. Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage. Farage's Britain. Nigel and Farage's Britain. Farage's Britain. The threat that reform now poses to our country and our democracy. Farage's Britain. Nigel Farage.
He actually mentioned him 30 times, right?
Yeah, Donald Trump.
And according to the Sun's story today, he warned of mass shootings. That's a pretty irresponsible thing to say. Apparently, Ed Davey warned of mass shootings in Britain if Nigel Farage gains power.
That was below the waterline.
That's really bad
because it goes back. This is their whole The foundation was that back in 2015, Nigel Farage was running to be MP down in South Thanet, and he had a guy called Raheem Kassam who now works over in Washington. Yeah, he works over in Washington.
He was one of Steve Bannon's guys, wasn't
he?
And
he came in to run the campaign, and he had this big highfalutin idea that you could literally transplant American politics into British politics. And he came in and he said, one of the things you need to do, Nigel, is to relax gun laws. Right. And of course, down in South Thanet, like, come on.
Yeah.
It's in the North.
Nobody cares.
Kent coast, and he failed. Ultimately, the Tories held onto the seat. He didn't become an MP. Right. And Farage, I actually spoke to him privately about it once. You know, he regretted. You know, it was a mistake.
Yes. What they should have done, of course, was to identify what the similar issue was, and then make it about that, but not guns, because that doesn't play.
It didn't work. And so. Anyway, the Lib Dems have leapt on this, and they've said once upon a time, you know, Nigel Farage, back in when he was leader of a different political party, said he would relax gun laws. Yeah. And as a result of Nigel Farage once saying he would relax gun laws, that means, despite Nigel Farage saying that he has no plans to relax any gun laws whatsoever, that if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll relax gun laws. Right. And then if you relax gun laws, then you're going to end up with mass shootings in this country. It's just not...
a bit of a leap, isn't it?
It's a huge leap. And then, so we asked the spokesman, the Lib Dem spokesman, before the speech about it, and he said, well, you know, we need to hold Nigel Farage to account. There's holding Nigel Farage to account. Fine, hold every politician to account, right? But I don't, you know, the leader of your political party standing up at the front on the stage of conference and creating an image of children cowering under desks, doing drills in case of mass shooter events, like what has happened in America, I don't think is...
It's not responsible.
It's not responsible, and that strikes fear. You know, many parents will be thinking, "Well, hang on, is this going to happen?" Well, Farage has said, to be fair, he's completely, you know, disowned that policy. He's not going to do it. But the Lib Dems have taken this, and this sticks in my craw actually quite a lot, because what they're accusing Nigel Farage and what they accuse Trump of, and they, you know, you can see the commentary around the whole thing. They're doing exactly the same thing, right? They're just hyping it up. Yeah. To say something that's ostensibly...
They're just throwing mud at a wall and hoping that it sticks, right?
Yeah.
That's really what they're doing.
And what they're also doing is they're trying to, you know, they're not just chucking any sort of mud, they're going for, very similar to what the Labour ministers were doing, Peter Carr was doing, when it comes to saying, you know, Nigel Farage would stick up for Jimmy Savile if he was alive today.
Right.
And they're going for the lowest common denominator.
Which is not going to do them any favours.
No,
because
and
people are not stupid.
No, and I think people will sort of think, hang on a moment, if you want to do high-minded politics, if you want to take the moral high ground, then play the ball, not the man.
Right.
But they're doing exactly the opposite.
Also, I don't know what the Lib Dems stand for any more than I did before they went to have their conference. I mean, you might be able to tell me. I don't know. And what's their any policy on anything? Do they want to rejoin the EU? I mean, even
they do.
They don't say much about that.
I think what's interesting, there were two takeaways, I think, that I got from it, is they're defining themselves now as just being anti-Farage, anti-Trump. They think that's the way to kind of scoop up disaffected Tories, disaffected Labour voters who don't want to vote for Nigel Farage. I think the second takeaway is there's a massive problem in that they are basing their vote particularly on Conservatives, and yet they will inevitably leap at the chance, you know, going on what Ed Davey has said, to prop up a Labour government.
Yeah.
We're going to end up, you know, we could end up in a situation where okay, Nigel Farage is Prime Minister, Reform win an overall majority, but we could also end up in a situation where Labour see their majority slashed. They don't have the majority in the House of Commons. Being the incumbent party, they get the first go at turning round to the Liberal Democrats and saying, hop into bed with us and support our government. And going by what Ed Davey said yesterday, that's likely.
They would do that.
They would
they
do
have
that.
no principles.
They would do that.
The Lib Dems are famous for having no principles.
They would do that
the last time they got into a coalition with the promise that they were going to reduce tuition fees,
Yeah.
and then they didn't bother.
And they're they're representing constituencies like, you know, they've got big people in places like their MPs in Maidenhead and Bicester and Woodstock. And I do wonder, in those Conservative seats where people actually believe in the idea of earning a crust, being able to hold on to your wealth and then pass it on to your children, how that's going to sit, but that's where the Lib Dems have their base now, right? How that's going to sit with Ed Davey propping up somebody who's probably going to end up being more left-wing than Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves when it comes to raising taxes on wealth. And I think there's a fracture there that is only going to, in their whole mindset and their whole policy, that's only going to get broader. But if you vote, the argument, I think, from Reform, and I think this is going to hear more from Farage, is, you know, you vote Lib Dem, you're going to end up with Labour.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
which is what you absolutely don't want. Let's not forget, they're also reclaiming the flag, as we mentioned earlier, and here is what a Lib Dem conference in 2025 now looks like. What are they doing? They don't do that. They've never done that.
No.
Why are they waving Union Jacks like a bunch of morons?
I think they're trying to, you know, they're saying they're not nationalists, but they're patriotic.
Oh yeah.
And
but but if anybody else does it though, they're nationalists, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's the framing, right?
Yeah.
So they could wave the flag. That's okay because they're waving it in the right way. But if you've seen,
if Reform are doing it, somehow that's wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't really wash, does it? It's not really much of a plan.
And Reform were waving the flag. They're waving the flag because Reform were waving the flag. So if Reform weren't waving the flag at their conference, you didn't see the flag at their conference.
I mean, I bet you could find footage of an old Lib Dem conference where they're all waving an EU flag, because that would have been more their style. I mean, that would at least be consistent.
See, if you go back to 2017, and I was at the EU ambassador to Britain held a drinks reception at the Marriott Hotel at the Lib Dem conference.
Yeah.
So, you know, the ties are strong.
Yeah, of course.
Between the European Union and the Liberal Democrats.
Of course they are. This from Mark in East Yorkshire. Good morning, Mike. I've just driven through the small hours from York to Newcastle Airport, from where I'm heading to another jihadi supporting state, Portugal. The journey summed this country up. Motorway in total darkness, service area unlit. I could hardly see to walk from the car park to the service building. Trump is right. The UK is a dark place. Keep banging the drum. It's a great show. I mean, sometimes you just wander about in Britain and you think, what is going on? You know, why does nothing work? Why is there such a problem with everything that we're trying to do? Everything seems to be broken. One story from yesterday that we did, of course, the Wetherspoons story, which was in the Surrey Quays Wetherspoons. People were being asked to queue behind one another in order to get a drink. Apparently, Tim Martin was listening, and they basically ditched the whole idea. David in New Cross says, Tim Martin must have heard you yesterday. Spoons have ditched the queuing system in Surrey Quays.
But this isn't I've been to the pub. I've been to a couple of pubs recently. It's not just Wetherspoons.
No, I know.
Lots of pubs.
Oh, I know.
And you go in and you have like a line.
I walk
to the
straight
till.
out again. I walk straight out again. I won't go to a pub like that.
I always thought that part of the jeopardy of going to the pub was, you know, having the competition of trying to get the barman or barmaid.
Gen Zers don't like that.
You have to you're at the bar, you've got your elbows out, you've got your cash there, and you're trying to get the attention to get your. And if you leave a tip, then you go back and you get.
This started during COVID, of course, because that's when they used to have.
But
people.
That's part of the game, isn't it? Going to the pub.
Yeah, but see, you're too old now because young people apparently are too frightened to get into that kind of, you know.
And then you
contest.
then you get to kind of like, if you get in first, you get to kind of go, got you there.
Yeah.
And then if you can get really, you know,
right. Or you can have friends and you'll go, I'll get you one while I'm here, I'll get you one, you know, you can do it like that, you know. Anyway, so another victory for the home of common sense. It just goes from bad to worse, doesn't it? I mean, one of the only things that they could sort of crow about was that they were keeping inflation relatively low until it went up just the other day, or stayed the same, shall we say, at 3.8%. But this is very bad news, isn't it?
It is. You know, the OECD, there are a bunch of sort of public sector policy wonks from various countries. There are 28 OECD countries around the world. And they sit in Paris and they make forecasts and we report them. And it is quite important. The market takes notice of what the OECD say. And as you rightly said, inflation stayed at 3.8% on the last numbers. When you think that the Bank of England's target is 2%, we're almost double that. And a lot of people listening, Mike, this morning will say, you telling me that life's only become 3.8% more expensive over the last year? Pull the other one, it's got bells on. These inflation numbers actually feel, you know, understating what's happening in the real world. But it is a blow for Rachel Reeves. Labour, of course, are making lots out of the fact that the OECD think that the UK is going to be the second fastest growing economy among the big G7 countries, but quite frankly, still very, very low growth. The Chancellor's desperate for some growth because it's only growth, an expanding economy that flatters the public finances and gives us some relief.
Yes, but yet again, another figure that comes out today shows that about 50,000 jobs in the private sector have disappeared in the past 3 months, just coming up to September. We know that, you know, a couple of 100,000 fewer jobs are now available, and unemployment's going to reach a 5-year high pretty soon. And without private sector growth, there is no growth, is there?
Again, I feel a lot of your viewers and listeners will sense when they hear about these numbers, it will chime with their experience. Pretty much since this time last year, Mike, when it became clear that Rachel Reeves was going to increase taxation in last October's budget, the so-called Halloween budget, hiring started to slow down. And after she announced that increase in employer national insurance, £25 billion annual increase last October, it came in April. But even last October, just news of it coming meant that lots of people, you know, didn't want to take on extra staff because of the extra costs. Lowering that threshold where you start paying national insurance from 12.5 grand roughly to 5 grand knocked out a lot of those little part-time jobs, particularly retail jobs, hospitality jobs, and hiring has fallen pretty much every month since last October, and that hasn't happened since the pandemic. Then on top of that, you had a whacking great increase in the minimum wage in April, particularly for youngsters, a huge inflation-busting increase. And again, it's a nice thing to do, and it makes you feel good if you're a politician to tell businesses to pay people more money. But businesses will respond by, you know, not replacing people who leave. They'll respond by backfilling. They'll respond by not expanding their workforce. And then on top of that, Mike, I'm afraid, sorry to be a font of a lot of woe this morning, but this is what's happening out there in business. On top of that, employers also know you've got this employment rights bill coming down the track, which has been in the House of Lords. The government haven't accepted any of the Lords amendments that were slightly diluting it. So it's now you can take your employer to a tribunal from day one of employment. You've got access to sick leave from day one of employment. You've got a lot of people who run businesses now worried that this extra cost and this extra regulation is making it harder to take people on.
Yeah. Indeed. And you're right to point out about the real price of inflation as well, because we did this last week, where, again, whenever we do inflation and inflation numbers come out, I always say to people, there's no way that food inflation is anywhere near 3.8%, and the official figure's 5.1, but The Sun did a very interesting study last week as well, where it showed things like the price of beef has gone up by about 50%, the price of coffee, milk, sugar, all of the kind of basic staples of your weekly shop have gone up incredibly high. And we've got electricity prices going up again, I think, in the next month. So people are getting squeezed everywhere they look.
And it's necessities. You talked about food, you talked about fuel there, electricity. Less well-off people, Mike, spend a higher share of their income on those things. So when inflation in those things is high, food and energy, and they definitely are, then the less well-off get disproportionately whacked, don't they? I mean, you know, you all know, Mike, you go into, let's sound like two media idiots now, you know, you go into a restaurant, the price of a starter now is what the price of a main course was a couple of years ago. I mean, it's completely mad. And the price of a main course is the price of what a whole meal used to be. And then, oh, do you want sides with that? I mean, like, so I paid 28 quid for a bit of fish and I don't get any potatoes with it.
I took my family out for a curry, right, in Sussex a few weeks ago. And, you know, my boys are now old enough to drink, unfortunately, so they were having a couple of beers. It was 250 quid for a curry for 4 people. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't some amazing, you know, expensive Indian restaurant. It was
you go into the shops to pick up a few bits and you've dropped 100 quid, right?
Yeah, I know.
It's scary. It's scary. And, you know, we all know that the actual headline inflation numbers, I don't know what they're doing at the ONS. They'll, of course, defend themselves. But I don't feel that the inflation statistics that are being published capture people's real lives. No. And I think it's becoming a major problem. And it isn't just some idle thought by a newspaper columnist. When that happens, Mike, you get an increase in what you call inflation expectations, and you get people bidding up their wages and pushing and for more money because they feel they're being they're being shortchanged because inflation is so high. And then you get businesses, you know, pushing up their costs to the people that they're supplying. That all goes up the supply chain. And when people expect inflation to happen, then they try and get in early and put up their prices, and it becomes a self-reinforcing spiral. And I'm afraid what the OECD is tapping into here, and they're right, is that the UK is increasingly looking like an outlier when it comes to inflation. Other big economies, their inflation over the spring and summer was steady, or it actually went down. It certainly stayed below 3%. Our inflation's been well above 3%, and next month it could hit 4%, double the Bank of England's target. That will push inflation expectations up, I'm afraid, even more.
I know. And we've been hearing a lot from people in the past, say, 3 weeks or so, people calling in, leaving us voice notes saying, I've just lost my job, I've just been made redundant, my hours have been cut in half, or, you know, my wife and I were going to buy a new car, but we can't really afford to do it because we don't know what's going to happen in the budget. You know, lots and lots of you know, ordinary people having really, really serious effects on their lifestyles. Have a listen to this. This is Tony on the cost of living.
Hi, Mike. It's Tony from Hampshire. Great show, by the way. My wife and I got our water bill yesterday, and it was £333. For the same 6-month period last year, it was £216. You know, I was thinking to myself, when we totted everything up, we must be a good £200 and odd, £300 a month worse off than we were this time last year, with all the increases and everything else, council tax, food, etc. We just get things so wrong in this country. All the hard-working, honest grafters out there get punished to pay for all the migrants and the lazy and the feckless. There really needs to be a sea change here and start rewarding people who are paying their way and trying to make something of themselves.
That is a very, very typical message that I've got from Tony. You feel for Tony. You know, the water bill alone going up by sort of more than 50%. It's incredible.
Yes, I just worked it out, Mike. It's 45% increase in the water bill. Absolutely crazy. You know, council tax is clearly going to go up big time in the budget because Rachel Reeves won't accept that raising tax rates actually will slow down the economy so much, even push it into a recession, so you'll get less tax revenue. She won't accept that because ideologically she doesn't want to give that message to economically illiterate Labour backbenchers who just want higher taxes for the sake of it, because ideologically they like higher taxes. Because Labour has increased taxes, I'm afraid, they're actually making the fiscal position worse. To use the jargon, we're beyond the peak of the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve, I know you've talked about it, the idea that you get tax rates up to such a point that actually you get less tax revenue because the economy shuts down and people move abroad and people change their behaviour and so on. Because she's done that, Mike, she's now in a position where financial markets are freaking out and saying, we're only going to lend you money, His Majesty's government, at very, very high interest rates. And again, the UK is an outlier. We're paying a lot more for our borrowing than France, Germany, Greece and Spain, by the way, with respect to Greek and Spanish friends. These countries usually pay a lot more than us for their borrowing. Actually, they're paying a lot less now because our finances are so weak. And because she's got a manifesto pledge not to raise income tax or employee national insurance. We thought it was all national insurance, but they reneged on that. So, of course, they put up employer national insurance. Because of that, Mike, she's scrambling around for little taxes here and there that are just going to completely wind people up, like a taxi tax.
Yeah.
As if taxis aren't expensive enough. You know,
well, except
what are cab drivers and Uber drivers going to think about that? You know,
unless you're a migrant, of course, in which case you get free taxi wherever you want to go. I mean, that's the story we've got in the papers this morning. That's what people are really getting cheesed off about. Let's talk about this plan that Keir Starmer's got. You know, his latest kind of reset. I don't know whether it's reset number 4, 5, 6 or 7 at this point, but he's apparently going to level up some of the areas of the country that he wants to spend money on because he thinks that will tackle the rise of reform. Well, first of all, he hasn't got any money, has he, to get rid of all of these boarded up shops and tell various different local councils that they can encourage business to come into their area. How's he going to do it?
Listen, you're right. He has absolutely no money. The thing that Rachel Reeves could do to help business actually didn't do, and that was not raise NI. That's really killed the job prospects, particularly of young people. We have at least 50,000 less young people employed now than when she came in to be the Chancellor. And people point to the fact that it's because of the NI raises. Everything else she's done around boosting the economy simply hasn't worked. And to suggest that you're going to put money in particular places, I think will be a challenge, because the first thing, you're going to have to find that money. And of course, the money, as always, will come out of our pockets.
Yes. And there's a reason why an awful lot of high streets up and down the country have become sort of, a bit vacuous and a bit empty. And partly it's due to the fact that local councils have somehow made people pay money to park there, so they don't bother going. They now go to supermarkets and they go anywhere near the high street. Also, business rates have gone up, and also just the general kind of, atmosphere for business and running a business in this country is very, very difficult at the moment because of all the taxes that they're having to pay.
Look, there's two entities. If you talk to business, they'll talk to you about NI, they'll talk to you about business rates, and they'll also talk to you about rent. They'll tell you rent has gone sky high, they simply can't afford to run, so they're closed down. And of course, people don't come in and use that high street. And the other end, of course, is the public. We are paying a staggering amount of tax. Actually, it's a record amount of tax, certainly since the Second World War, and that's reflected itself in the amount of time that we spend on the high street. People now won't go out for a drink, they'll stay at home and have a drink because they simply can't afford to pay for these drinks. That's drinks if you go out to eat, you just won't anymore, and it all falls to the government. And all the promises they made before the election are now not coming true. They talked about a black hole, which, by the way, the Office of Budget Responsibility didn't endorse, but whatever black hole they were talking about, they've grown it substantially, and we'll have to see what the next budget is going to be what it's going to address. And I know for one thing, it's going to be painful for Londoners.
Yeah, it certainly is going to be painful for Londoners and for other people up and down the country as well, because, in other parts of the country, there's even less chance of you picking up money from punters because they simply haven't got the money to spend because everybody is worse off. Let me show you this clip. It's a clip of you talking about Deputy Mayor for Policing, Keir Schwartz, and double standards and two-tier policing. Check this out.
I just want to make a point. You were very correct in your condemnation of the attacking of police, and you tried to be even-handed, but where you weren't even-handed is that you named Unite the country, but you didn't name Palestine Action. So, and the reason I bring this up to you, because many Londoners, I've been written to now a number of times, are complaining that your office and the mayor are not even-handed in these things. Would you care to name and condemn the behaviour of the Palestine Action protests in just the same way that you did Unite the country?
When the chair mentioned those arrests in relation to the protests against in the protests on Palestine Action Group, I condemned any violence towards a police officer.
To be clear, you condemned violence towards police officers. You didn't condemn the violence at that particular protest. That was my point.
Yeah. They do have a bit of a problem, don't they, in old Sadiq Khan's administration, about sort of telling the truth about things that they don't really want to talk about.
I think a lot of what they do is they're very quick to call people far right. They're very quick to condemn lots of communities who would consider themselves indigenous or just plain ordinary British community, but they're very quick to tiptoe around other issues around Palestine Action, etc. And why that is particularly important, because the police in London are struggling with the idea that they do two-tier policing, and the police really, really hate that. But of course, if you're a casual observer, you think the mayor is part of the police. That's correct. He's the police commissioner for London. So you're asking yourselves, why isn't he speaking about one group in the same way he's speaking about another? I think it's really, really, really important, because people now don't feel like they're being protected by the law, and that's just one step away from anarchy.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, crime in London is absolutely sky high. And without wishing to put myself at the front and centre of this, I had my car broken into last night. Somebody smashed the back window. It didn't actually really take very much, but you know, it happened in a car park, which I was paying £40 for the privilege of parking in. You know, and there's a sense that literally the place is completely lawless. I mean, Donald Trump had a go at Sadiq Khan just the other day, and here's what Sadiq Khan said in response to him. Have a look.
What it is about this Muslim mayor who leads a liberal, multicultural, progressive, successful city that means I appear to be living rent-free inside Donald Trump's head.
I mean, he's obsessed with himself. He's obsessed with the fact that London's a multicultural city, but what he's not obsessed with is making it a safe city. Poppy Coburn was here with me, you'll know her from The Telegraph, saying that, you know, she's now more and more concerned about travelling on public transport, more and more concerned about walking around the city at night. You know, James Price was talking to me about his wife. She won't be walking around the city when it gets dark. You know, we are in a bad place in London, aren't we?
Look, for certain communities, crime has never gone down. It's always been high. And there's certain crimes in London, rape being one of them, that are particularly high, that the police really do need to focus on. Violence against women and girls has been something the mayor's talked about a lot, but he hasn't been that effective in reducing. So yes, people are right to say that crime in London is high. There's particular crimes that we're managing to push down slightly, we're getting on top of, but generally, if you go back 5, 10 years, even 15, London is significantly more dangerous now than it was then. And what's interesting is we had less police officers then. And I think one of the reasons why you'll hear me continually going about two-tier policing is I believe many police officers are afraid to do their job, because they know their political paymasters will not provide them with any cover if something happens. In fact, they often throw them under the bus. That's why you're beginning to see that feeling of lawlessness. I mean, if you look what happened around shoplifting, you know, unless you stole over £200, the police wouldn't even show up. So that basically made shoplifting semi-legal. Right. And lots of people took that to heart. And what it did is it pushed this idea that London is crimeless and you can do as you please because you won't be confronted by the police. That is something we're going to have to turn around. I personally now have sort of sidestepped Sadiq, and I go straight to the government because I'm in the law to say, what are you going to do about it? Because you've had a mayor traditionally ignored it, so we need the government to get on top of this.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's very exciting news this morning, isn't it? You know, the Labour government teeters on the brink of collapse on pretty much every day now, and I just enjoy whichever the next chapter is. And this morning, it looks like Morgan McSweeney's ever closer to the door at Downing Street, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you can tell that he's not going to be long for this world, and there's a little giveaway for that, which is that Keir Starmer said, I have full confidence in him. He said, I had full confidence St Angela Rayner, then she's out the door by the
2
next day.
2 days later, right?
Yeah, 2 days later she's gone. I have full confidence in Peter Mandelson. I don't even think 24 hours
one
passed
day later, yeah, that's
for
right.
this. So, you know, by the time the show is over, I'm sure we're going to be getting reports that Morgan McSweeney has jumped onto brighter and better things. I mean, this is a massive, massive
huge
scandal
story,
for Mr Squeaky Clean Keir Starmer, who ran on anti-sleaze campaign. You know, this is absolutely massive. £739,000 in unregistered, you know, campaign slush funds. Labour together have been so pivotal in getting the Starmer project off the ground.
Well, I mean, it was down to them that he actually became leader, wasn't it?
Absolutely, because, you know, you remember after Jeremy Corbyn lost the election, the Labour left was still absolutely the dominant force within the party. You know, there were talks that Rebecca Long-Bailey was going to end up being the next Labour leader. The fact that it was Keir Starmer was purely because the centre got together and said, we can't have another nutter in charge of the Labour Party, we'll lose another election.
We'll never get in.
Exactly, and I think this shows the level of desperation and dirty tricks they were willing to engage in to get Starmer over the line. The problem is, if you are so pivotal to the Starmer project, as McSweeney is, he is the brains of the operation. You know, Sacha Lord said, a fish rots from the head. You know, if you lose McSweeney, that's it. Starmer is not himself a talented politician. He's just a kind of empty shell.
And he doesn't appear to have any kind of ideology, does he? Because he kind of swings from one sort of side of the aisle to the other in 24 hours. He doesn't have any
Forget
beliefs.
ideology. He hasn't got a favourite song. He hasn't got a favourite book.
No.
I mean, he seems to be someone entirely without personality.
He's literally a cyborg, isn't he? It's really weird.
He's literally like a robot.
The funniest thing, actually, this week, and we're going to do it on Plank of the Week when it comes out on Friday night, is I don't know if you saw the little skit that he did after Chequers, where he thanked the police, you know, for doing their jobs and protecting him and doing a great thing all around Donald Trump's visit. And he speaks to them through a walkie-talkie. And the walkie-talkie Keir Starmer actually sounds more human than the real one. You know, he sounds less of a robot through the walkie-talkie. It's very weird. It's very funny.
No, I mean, and this is great news for the Tories, because the Tories have been going really hard on this. You know, it's nice for them to have a bit of good news, or at least bad news happening to someone that isn't their party. But, you know, I think they've got really good grounds here. It's not just that this money was being funneled through to Keir Starmer. It's that there seemed to have been a falsehood that was said when they denied that the money was engaged in the first place.
Right, and that's the story today, isn't it? That basically they've been saying through, I think when Pat McFadden was rolled out yesterday, he said, oh, you know, the Electoral Commission looked into it. Yes, they sanctioned us and they gave a fine of sort of £14,000 to Labour Together, and that's the end of it. Well, that's not the end of it, because actually it's not very clear whether they knew about the £740,000 when they gave that fine, and it seems as though that maybe wasn't the case.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, when there's a political scandal, everyone goes with the, you know, what's that song by Shaggy? It wasn't me. You know, deny. You know, I did nothing wrong. But I mean, there's a really good quote here from the Mail, Dan Hodges' column. Morgan basically ran Keir's leadership campaign. I mean, it doesn't get more straightforward than that, you know.
Because they're claiming there's no connection, aren't they, between Labour Together's money and Keir Starmer's you know, leadership campaign. And in fact, it's very clear that there was a connection. We've got a couple of clips, actually. This is from 2020. Here's Keir Starmer on Sky News talking about it.
There are very strict rules, as you know, for these competitions. Everything that is given to any campaign has to be not only registered but also declared. I've had contributions from trade unions, from crowdfunding and from individuals, and I'm sure the other candidates have as well. I think this is one of those things that's swirling around so far. As I say, the candidates themselves have avoided taking lumps out of each other. I think some of the outriders are trying to stir things up a bit now. But in the end, of course, there has to be transparency and accountability, and we will all be declaring where our money came from and how much we each spent on the campaign.
He's very good. See, that should have been a clue back then, where all he talks about is that there are rules in place, and I followed those rules, and when those rules become clear, you will know exactly who's been giving me money. But he won't actually say. Here's an even better one. This is from Andrew Neil interview in 2020. This one I love. Check this out.
The Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign.
That is why the Labour Party set up those rules.
But you won't tell us.
The Labour Party rules say carry out the checks, which we have to carry out, and I've got a compliance team doing that. Once you're satisfied the checks are carried out and the donations are proper in order, they go to the parliamentary authorities who put them on the parliamentary website so that everybody can see them. I've been following that procedure. That is exactly the parliamentary rules.
But the other candidates in this contest have published who is bankrolling their campaign.
And he goes on, he says, well, why don't you just tell me who your biggest donors are? Well, in the fullness of time, you know, the compliance team will tell us exactly whether or not those donations are real. And all he is about, I've followed the rules.
He's a classic lawyer, isn't he? You know,
but the
you
rules
can tell.
make you look like a complete plonker.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be honest with you, who I want to speak to right now, or at least listen to their side of the story, is the Labour left.
Yes.
And I rarely want to listen to what they have to say. But I bet they've got loads of secrets, you know, because they've known the truth about Starmer for longer than the rest of the country did.
And they actually hate Starmer even more than we do.
Well, they did, because they got shafted by him, of course, in this leadership contest, you know, and I think they know that there's a whiff of sleaze about the Prime Minister, you know, Mr. Squeaky Clean. It wouldn't be so damaging if he hadn't gone so hard on saying, I'm Mr. Respectable, I'm Mr. Rule Follower, as you can see in those previous 2 clips. You know, if you're going to say that, if you're going to pretend, you know, don't live in a glass house and throw stones. That's the big problem.
I mean, Dan Hodges, we have a very sort of funny ongoing relationship with Dan, because Dan, when we started talking to him, before Labour even got in, was sort of a bit like, you know, the grown-ups are going to come in, it's all going to be different, we get time to get rid of the Tories, and we were all by that stage going, actually, let's get rid of the Tories, because, you know, there's no more room for them to expand into. But ever since about the last 6 months or 7 months, he's completely gone round in a 360-degree circle, and every single day now, he writes about how useless Keir Starmer is, and how awful. And his headline, Starmer's hiding behind the number 10 curtain, but this scandal is not going away. And again, you know, he didn't go to New York for the UN because he didn't want to be told off and spanked by Donald Trump about Palestine. He also didn't want to sit there while Donald Trump was telling him what a horrible place London is. But he won't come out and speak about the things that people want him to talk about. There's no Prime Minister's questions. And it's going to be interesting. I wanted to ask you, because you're going up to Liverpool this weekend for their conference. If McSweeney goes before the start of the conference, it's a nightmare. If he goes during the conference, it's a nightmare. If he stays for the whole conference, it's a nightmare. So there is no good place for him, is there?
I can't help but think it could be even worse had it not been for all these left-wing splinter groups. Actually, they're not going to be at the conference, half of them, because they're going to be whatever the York Fruit and Nut Party, whatever that conference is decided on by the Central Committee. Apparently,
they can't decide where to have it.
Well, you know, again, by the time this show goes on, you know, I'm sure it will be cancelled by then. But yeah, and there's the Green Party conference as well. Whenever that's going to happen in their eco zone. I think the problem is it's the momentum, right? It's the momentum behind the Prime Minister. It seems to be like scandal. He's done how many resets now? We're on number 17?
Well, I don't know if we're still in phase 2 or not. I'm presuming phase 2 got killed off when Angela
Rayner and Mandelson.
You know, got dumped. Well, even before Mandelson, that was the end of phase 2. I assume we're in phase 3 now, possibly 4.
We're going to get a hat-trick if McSweeney goes out the door. You know, I just think at this point, I think you pointed out, well, he's hiding from his own MPs. If he's afraid of his own MPs, how can you expect him to talk to voters who really are angry at him? You know, and I think that is the mood of the country. People were fed up with the Tories. They wanted a breath of fresh air. Unfortunately, Keir Starmer is just like the rest of them.
He really is.
He's just as bad
as
the rest of them.
In fact, he's worse, because he's sanctimonious about it, and he's hypocritical about it. Whereas, you know, when you look at people like Boris Johnson, who we'll look at later, because he was in, I saw him yesterday being interviewed by Harry Cole, you know, he's sort of rising from the dead, but not really. You thought what you saw was what you got. You sort of knew that he was walking out of the House of Commons chamber and probably going to, you know, have some liaison with some woman he shouldn't have been with, and you know, a couple of glasses of wine and off back to his wife or whatever. You kind of knew how he was behaving outside of the chamber. Whereas with Starmer, you don't really know what he's up to.
No.
Because he pretends to be one thing, which he absolutely isn't.
But I think this is classic Labour Party, isn't it? You know, it's like, because we're the good guys, all the bad things we do are in service of being good people. So how dare you, like, put us under any scrutiny whatsoever? And again, this is McSweeney. McSweeney is a serious political operator, and I mean that in a kind of slightly derogatory way. You know, like, he knows where the bodies are buried. He's mendacious,
isn't he?
He is indeed. You know, and he's clearly a very smart guy. I don't think Pat McFadden's wrong when he went out defending him. You know, the Tories are frightened of him. I think that's true. He is actually very talented.
But the Tories, this is what I was also saying yesterday, the Tories could be kind of reborn. If they target McSweeney and get him him out,
it's a good
that sort of gives them a bit more kind of relevance. Relevance they haven't had really since July.
Although I'd always say be careful what you wish for, because if we get rid of Keir Starmer, who's coming next? If Keir Starmer's really gone, and I think he will be if McSweeney goes, because he is so pivotal to his rise to power, it does worry me about which direction the Labour Party will go in, because I think they'll pivot really hard left. I really
think they will, and I don't think necessarily that Andy Burnham is the answer. I mean, he's on the front page of the New Statesman, looking. You know, that thing I was saying to Kevin O'Sullivan the other day. You know, if you want to look intelligent, you know, don't look at the camera. Kind of look like that. and that's what he's doing. He's kind of looking over there, as if, you know, I'm looking into the distance.
Looking towards number 10.
Vision, and I'm wearing something really cool that makes me look like I'm a member of New Order or something, you know. And, you know, I'm really down with the kids. But actually, Andy Burnham is another absolute hypocrite, complete and utter, you know, charlatan. He's not particularly remembered well as an MP.
No.
Was not a particularly great member of the shadow cabinet, and isn't really a brilliant mayor of Manchester.
Well, if he was so fantastic, he would have won a leadership contest the other two times he tried to go for it.
He lost him twice, didn't he?
He lost twice, yeah, he did. And
once to Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
And you go, well, if you're losing to Jeremy Corbyn, that's not a great, you know, sign, is it?
There was a good thing in that New Statesman interview where some, you know, anonymous MP was quoted by saying, like, he failed in Westminster. Like, yeah, maybe he is beloved in Manchester, although I don't actually believe that narrative. No. But he failed in Westminster, you know, and the truth is, it is a lot easier to be a mayor than it is to be the Prime Minister of a country that's got a lot of very, very deep problems. Yeah. And, you know, there was something on the front page of the Telegraph today where he's talking about what he actually wants to do for the country. It's that he wants to borrow more money.
Yeah.
When
and he wants to introduce a wealth tax.
A wealth tax. He wants to increase the top rate of income tax to 50p. You know, he wants to do all these things that the Labour left have been calling out for. There will be a run on the pound. I'm not joking about that. If he actually borrows £40 billion more just to build council housing, was one of the things he said. Like, there will be a run on the pound. I want investment in, like, facilities in this country, but first you cut spending. Right. And this is not a man who's going to cut spending.
No. And we saw yesterday the story, great story in the Sun. It was actually a BBC initialised story about these taxis that are being used to run migrants around the country. Billions and billions of pounds being spent, and yet we're told by Rachel Reeves, oh, we haven't got any money, we better tax you some more because, you know, we've got big public spending commitments. They need to stop the money that they're spending on the migrants, you know, literally tomorrow, and then hopefully say to people, actually, we can give you maybe a tax rebate, or maybe we can knock some tax off. But they can't keep coming back for more money while they're wasting it on all these bloody international bozos.
Well, this is why the Labour Party aren't right for this moment, because it's like that's what they're good at. They are good at spending public money. You know, it's used. My granddad always used to say, you have the Tories and you have Labour in, and they'll spend a bit of money, and then you get the Tories back in to, you know, sort out your finances. But the Tories spent loads of money, didn't cut any spending. Labour are even better at spending our money and not cutting any spending. It just gets to the point where you go, like, who's actually going to get control of the situation?
Is anyone going to get control of it? And looking at Dan Hodges' piece today, he says yesterday's response from Labour Welfare Secretary Pat McFadden to this newspaper's publication of the McSweeney Gate emails really is quite instructive. He says, Morgan, this is what Pat McFadden said, Morgan is a highly talented individual. I'm not surprised the Tories are targeting someone like that. They'll see him as a formidable opponent who worked with me to deliver the biggest Labour victory for a long, long time. And as Dan says, no attempt to address the details of revelations, no attempt to explain how this money was not accounted for, no attempt to explain how this money was somehow hidden from the Electoral Commission. And as I spoke to Kevin Hollinbrake the other day, chairman of the Tory party, and he said, this is a police matter, a crime has been committed.
Yeah.
And if that turns out to be true, then old McSweeney's not only out of a job, he might have the old, he might have the Rozzers round to take him down to the station for questioning.
Well, there you go. Well, I mean, it's not as bad as sending a tweet, obviously, so I'm sure we'll get away with it.
No.
But yeah, I mean, this is a really serious allegation that's been levelled at the Labour Party. They are not going to be able to wiggle out of this one. No. They're not going to be able to do their lawyer talk and talk around a question. You know, if this was any other party, and I know it's a cheap shot, but if it was any other party, if this was coming from Reform, I mean, this would be non-stop scandal. You have every Labour, you know, front bench member coming out there saying, like, government of sleaze, look at classic Farage, or look at all these scandals, and yet when it's them, you know, we're supposed to just move on from the story and they're getting on with the hard business of government.
And they're not addressing it. And they think, because again, this is their sort of modus operandi, isn't it, in Downing Street at the moment, is just ignore it and it will go away. Well, it doesn't go away. You think they'd learn. A couple of tweets for you. Daniel in Surrey says, morning, Mike. I've taken the liberty of booking a taxi for Morgan McSweeney. The Westminster cab firm said they now have a dedicated driver on standby most Fridays. Absolutely right. Friday seems to be the day they usually go. And Tony says, I predict Morgan McSweeney will be gone by the end of play today. Well, listen, I just think it's that kind of story that we've seen before, Poppy, haven't we? It needs one more kind of little revelation to just push it over the edge. We're at that stage. We're literally standing on the edge of the precipice, and all it needs is somebody to just go like that.
I think before Labour conference, they're going to try and fight like hell to keep on to McSweeney, because it will be so embarrassing if you've lost 3 really important people to your project, you know, in a couple of days. But I don't know. I think you're right. If there's one more story.
Yeah.
One more little angle.
Here's the $64,000 question. All of these revelations, right? Is it possible, by any stretch of the imagination, that some of this stuff has come out as the revenge of Peter Mandelson?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think he's feeding the beast?
Yeah. You know, Prince of Darkness.
Sitting in the back going...
I mean, you know, when he was on his way out, was that sinister quote he gave to some reporter being like, you know, this won't be the last you see of me. He's like a pantomime villain, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Yeah, he will know where all the bodies are buried.
He's like some Dick Dastardly standing behind the curtain.
Well, all the briefing behind McSweeney, because you know, I think they are correct to say there's clearly a coordinated campaign. Yeah. And there was a suggestion it was coming from the Labour left. I don't believe it. I think it's Mandelson. Yeah. He's the one who's smart enough to actually get rid of Mandelson, you know, because he wanted to stay in that job. He was telling Starmer, you need me, you need me. And I think that was a bit of a veiled threat, to be honest.
Definitely.
Absolutely. It would be in character for him, wouldn't it?
That would be. It would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if they start eating each other? It'd just be brilliant. I mean, there's some truth, I think, to the suggestion that this has all been thrown out there in haste, because I know they've been talking about it for a while, but looking at the detail of it, you know, there seems to be an awful lot of holes in it, right? I'm with you, and I take your points that you're going to make about the danger that this could possibly cause to our freedoms and our privacies, and I'm absolutely with you. But when you read things like, you know, will be subject to consultation as far as the practicalities of the scheme are concerned, including how it will work for those in the UK without a smartphone or a passport. Well, if it doesn't work, if you haven't got a passport, how's it going to work for the illegal migrants?
Exactly the case. This has got nothing to do with stopping illegal migrants, Mike. We know that in France, Italy and Germany, they have ID schemes and they have hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants that they're sending back or they're not stopping, and they have issues with them. The idea that the ID is going to stop them is preposterous. It's insulting. It is true that Labour Together's plan for a Brit card says that it will be till around 2027, and we know it would need to go through Parliament. There will be all sort of measures. Unless they did some mad emergency act, they can't just impose it like next week. Yeah. However, that's why it's so important now that we really thrash out all these key issues, because, you know, you say you're absolutely with me on these points on privacy, but I think if you say to the British public right now, if we can stop the boats and we can stop crime, would you do something? Those that aren't looking into all the detail of it may be minded to do it. You know, it's convenient, it's going to stop fraud, stop crime. But let's look at the numbers. Hundreds of millions of data breaches consistently across social media, and that's with people who are good at tech, not the government. Right. The UK wallet, we know that millions got on the NHS app just to get a GP appointment because you can't get that. And a bit like during COVID and lockdowns, they told us that these COVID apps, these vaccine passports, would somehow do something about COVID and lockdowns. No, what it would do is restrict us more and not have anything to do with the actual issue. And this is exactly the same again. It's, on the one hand, it is an attempt to make a big news piece because there's a concern about Andy Burnham challenging Keir Starmer. There's a concern about funding that's come in with Labour Together, we should say, the people who've put this forward with McSweeney. So there are concerns that Labour's got. They've got their conference. Mike, at the conference this weekend, togetherdeclaration.org and Farmers to Action are going to be doing a big rally. Farmers to Action have been rallying for a month across Britain. We've also got a campaign, a challenge against digital ID. We're going to be bringing our voices to Labour Party conference on Sunday, making sure everyone hears about it. The crucial things are these, Mike. Over the last year or two, we've discussed these things. Debanking, two-tier policing, people being imprisoned or having police come around their house because of social media posts. The questions of low traffic neighbourhoods and clean air zones where we've had bogus reports around net zero, and then we've had fines and surveillance of cars and limits and restricting them. All of these things underpinned by a central digital ID would just become far worse. Not just Graham Linehan arrested at the airport, but actually people being able to perhaps switch you off directly. We know that the CEO of the Bank of International Settlements has said, but the central bank digital currency using digital ID would be fantastic because we can track every transaction. In Britain, we don't want to be a papers, please society. Winston Churchill made that point in 1952, would set us free to get rid of a national ID system. And Tony Blair and the Tony Blair Institute has been trying to implement this for so long. And now Keir Starmer is so desperate, his party and his government are so split. And we're saying that everyone should get involved. Get involved with togetherdeclaration.org. We've got campaigns and protests around the country. People can lobby their MPs Obviously, we've got a councillors' vote again in May. It's going to be very important. And many are coming out, many from the centre, from the right and the left, as it happens, are all saying they're opposed to digital ID.
Well, we were saying earlier, Nigel Farage and Jeremy Corbyn sort of united against it, you know, which tells you something. But you know, I listened with slight incredulity and horror yesterday to Peter Cardwell's show. He had a guy called Ivan Sampson on, who's an immigration lawyer, a human rights lawyer, who was saying how important it is to stop these illegal migrants from coming into the country. But he also said, right, he said, now, if you've got one of these ID cards and you want to go shopping, you can go to Tesco's and you can buy your stuff and that'll be fine. But if you haven't got one, you won't be able to. And I'm going, hang on a minute. You know, what if you don't want one of these things? There's no suggestion of what would happen, whether there's a fine for not having one. There's a suggestion that there could be a fine if you don't update your details. But what on earth are we doing in a society if you're saying to people you won't be allowed to go food shopping unless you've got an ID card?
Absolutely, and it's being presented not just for food shopping at supermarkets, but for renting, for working, for a whole array of vital things. We're told it will really help with services. My mum's not using digital ID. Right. She has to go to the bank and do it all in an analog way. There are millions of older people. There are all sorts of other people who are not connected to digital ID, nor should we have to be. The idea that to engage and participate in society, you have to have biometric proof. And this is exactly the same argument about the Online Safety Act, Mike, right? They're saying it's to protect children, but what it will end up doing is, like in Australia, forcing all adults to have a digital ID biometric engagement just to log on to the public square now. And we've seen, even in the last week, Mike, Marks and Spencer's, Heathrow grounded. We've seen the 19,000 Afghanis, data breaches. We've seen them in New South Wales. We've seen them in Estonia, where they're saying, look how great it is. Millions of people's data breached. We've seen Ardar with 1.4 billion in India, where people are having their data sold. Right. It's a travesty for our privacy. The British public we must discuss this much more. We're all pushing back. We'd encourage everyone to get involved in togetherdeclaration.org. This is the key fight now for everyone in Britain. And as you say, it doesn't really matter whether you're left, centre or right. On this issue, we can all unite against it.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because the cyber attacks alone, I mean, Jaguar Land Rover, in the paper today, we're being told that the government might have to go and buy a load of their spare parts just to keep them going, because they're apparently, they're literally sort of 1 week from collapse. They haven't made any cars for about 2 months, and then talking about not making any until the 1st of November. And that is the problem, as you say. I mean, these are people that understand tech, and they understand how the modern world of social media works. You know, the government, as Mark, our last voice note has said, are completely useless when it comes to this stuff.
Absolutely. So there's loads of concerns there. And let's look at what happened in Portugal and Spain when there was a power cut. And we know with net zero, there are more and more concerns around blackouts and power cuts. How are people engaging? Are we just having things shut down and shut off? And the other concern is we've seen cancel culture. We've seen people being shut down from jobs and positions and pursued. Well, is it going to be that we've just got a government that doesn't like what people are saying? They're saying that's either Islamophobic or it's far right, as they've said about most of the British public now who are concerned about borders. And we get logged out of things. Maybe our carbon footprint is a bit too much with petrol, and we get stopped, we get fined, we get limit constantly surveyed and monitored, like the councils who want to fine people about not recycling properly in their bins. The whole idea of a big brother state, that we're a walking QR code, a barcode, just like with facial ID, none of this was in the manifesto. None of this was in any discussion in advance. This is a desperate attempt, Mike, to control and limit us. And we'd encourage everyone to get involved together and fight back on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently what happens when you ask Steve Reid a question about Morgan McSweeney is that suddenly his internet fails and he goes offline. I can't imagine how that would happen. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Let's talk to Kate Ferguson, political editor at The Sun on Sunday. Kate, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, I hope your internet isn't going to suddenly fail if I ask you a question you don't fancy answering. I mean, that is about as bad a gaffe as I've ever seen.
It's a new get out of jail free. I think I might try that later, actually, if it's too tricky.
Yeah, I mean, the big story, obviously, this morning is ID cards. We'll come on to your big news show and your interview with Robert Jenrick in a sec. But the big new ID cards, a lot of people are already saying to me this morning, are you sure this is not just some kind of dead cat to throw in front of Morgan McSweeney to get him off the front pages? Because he's still in the mire. We've still got Andy Burnham off to the side, you know, pretending he doesn't want to be Prime Minister. Labour Party conference coming up on Sunday. You know, Starmer still is in quite a bit of trouble, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, this move to adopt ID cards have been kind of a few months coming, really. They've been inching towards it. But I think we were expecting it potentially a bit later, potentially to be something that he announced at conference. I don't know about the dead cat with Morgan McSweeney, but I do think that part of the move to ID cards is this feeling that they need to be seen to be doing something big and potentially something controversial on borders. To be honest, I think it's a lot easier and better for the government if they're having a big discussion about ID cards, the rights and wrongs of that, what they're doing to crack down on illegal working black market Britain, than actually the cameras being on those boat numbers day in, day out.
Yes.
So, yes, of course, look, there is a real conversation about whether or not this will help find illegal immigrants living in this country working illegally. The stats are shocking, right? I think it's something like 1 in 10 workers, maybe it's more than that, are illegal workers. It's a huge booming economy here, and everyone agrees you've got to do something about it. But the politics of it, yes, I mean, it is better for them to be talking about a policy, even a controversial policy that they are doing, than to be talking about inertia, inaction.
Right. Yeah, you're right, because obviously the whole 1 in, 1 out thing, we're now almost 2 weeks into it, and as far as I know, unless something else has happened, they've managed to deport 4 people to France, and we brought 3 people in, you know, a couple of parents and a child, and so by any measure it's moving incredibly slowly. And I think somebody did a calculation which would suggest that if that's the speed at which we're deporting people who shouldn't be here, we're going to be at it for about 1,000 years.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are crazy. You know, loads and loads of work goes into those deportation deals. It was announced to quite a lot of fanfare by the last Home Sec. Then they managed to get that first person on a flight. Obviously a symbolic moment, something the new Home Sec was very kind of relieved at. But that same day, 1,000 people arrived here on small boats, I think, because the weather had been good. So, you know, those numbers are just dwarfing anything the government seems to be doing. So I do think that they're going to have to be kind of shaking the tree to pull any, I'm confusing my metaphors here, but really pull any lever they can. They need to be looking to be throwing the kitchen sink at this, because, you know, each thing they try may only have a small impact.
That's exactly right. The other big story this morning, I just want to get your view on quickly, I'm sure you've seen it, is this new YouGov poll, which came out this morning, revealing an incredible scale of conservative implosion. You're talking to Robert Jenrick in your first big show coming up this week. But the MRP polling projection, based on a 13,000 sample, shows Reform putting Nigel Farage absolutely clearly on his own into Downing Street as the Prime Minister. Seat-by-seat guide has got them going up to 311, Labour down to 144, Lib Dems 78, and Conservatives down to 45.
Yeah, this is one of those posh polls, right? Those polls that actually kind of go seat by seat, take a lot of work, cost a lot of money. So this is a poll everyone will be looking at. It's crazy, really. I mean, Nigel Farage is storming ahead. That support for reform out there in the real world just keeps building. So we spend a lot of time in politics, on radio shows like this, talking about those like Labour civil wars. We'll talk about it later, probably. Could and Burnham come and replace Keir Starmer one day? Well, meanwhile, the voters, I wonder if they've just stopped listening. They're going elsewhere. Hugely bad news for the Tory party. Look, the Tory party is a 200-year-old party. It was the most successful election-winning machine in Europe, in Western Europe. Yeah, they are the natural party of government in this country, and they face being decimated, like absolutely decimated in the next election if these polls are anything to go by. Huge wake-up call to their party. I know we're going to talk about the show in a minute, but when I was talking to Robert Jenrick, he had this really stark message that they need to start fighting. You know, you can't just cede the ground to Nigel Farage. They need to be going out there, making the bigger argument, trying to kind of each day wrestle control back from Labour and from Reform and make people talk about the Tories again. Their conference in just over a week. Is Kemi Badenoch's first as leader? Could it be her last as leader? You know, the plots are thick in Westminster at the moment.
Absolutely right, which brings us nicely to a little clip from your new show. It's a new YouTube show, Kate's Political Lunch Dates. Here's a clip with Robert Jenrick.
I think that people are sick of seeing, you know, the Gaza flag being put up, a lamppost, a Pakistan flag. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I went down the road from here in Newark and put up Union flags on lampposts for a couple of hours, and car after car, HGV drivers, van drivers were honking their horns. They were saying, good for you. People want us to feel pride in our country, and in order to do that, you have got to integrate people properly and expect that everyone who comes into our country cherishes our history and our heritage and our culture.
Should there be this ban of putting up the kind of the Palestine flag then in public buildings or in the...
Well, look, I don't want foreign flags on public buildings.
Yeah.
I don't want to see them on the streets.
I mean, that's a very strong signal there that he wants to move the Conservative Party very much firmly to the right. It shouldn't have to sound like that, but what did you make of his performance there?
Yeah, I mean, Robert Jenrick is the Tory politician making all the running at the moment. He's really gone through this political transformation, which we also talk about in the show. You know, I think a few years ago, people would probably not be able to pick Robert out of a kind of room, kind of a grey-suited Tory. But he's gone over there. He's been kind of his views has hardened as a minister, particularly in the Home Office. He talked about how he got into the Home Office, everything was broken. It was a total bin fire, and that's what made him kind of really harden his views. And he's going out there and is grappling with these big issues at the moment. It's interesting, his comments on the flag. I mean, he's backing those people who are going out hoisting flags on their local lampposts. We've got Keir Starmer today making a big speech where he'll talk about ID cards. The other thing he's going to be talking about is his vision of patriotism, how he thinks of flags being abused by populists and he wants to kind of reclaim it. He trailed a bit of that in our paper last weekend, the PM. But so you do have this kind of really big, hot political fight at the moment over, you know, whose flag is it anyway? What should we do about our flag? What our vision for the country and patriotism is? Look, I mean, I think Robert is the one to watch in the Conservative Party at the moment. People, mentioned it earlier, people always ask about a Boris comeback. I think if Kemi's out, you're talking about a Robert leadership.
Yeah, I mean, certainly after that show we did the other night with Harry Cole Saves the West, and after Boris Johnson's interview with him, I mean, the message I got certainly from a lot of our listeners and viewers was they don't want Boris Johnson back. They don't think he's the answer. They think he had his chance. They think he betrayed them over Brexit. They think he betrayed them. I think the reform accusations about the Boris wave are certainly taking hold. People are listening to that and believing that Boris Johnson was responsible for lowering the immigration sort of thresholds in this country, and they don't want to see him back in power.
Immigration is the big issue. It's the big issue for the country. It's the big issue, which is why the Reform are doing so well in the polls. It could be what leads to Keir Starmer being booted out of office. And it's this issue that the Tories are really struggling with. They were in power for, what was it, 14 years. It's their legacy we're living with. It's their legacy that they kind of have to own. And I think the difficult thing about Boris, you saw that in his interview, is that, you know, he doesn't want to throw himself under the bus, right? He wants to defend what he did as Prime Minister. That's totally natural. That's what leaders want to do. But meanwhile, there's a lot of anger out there about, yes, illegal immigration, but also the sheer numbers of legal migration. Yeah. I think what we learned over the last few years is that numbers do still count. And if you promise to get those numbers down, election after election, year after year, and fail, then people will stop trusting you. And guess what? They'll stop voting for you. Yeah. That's the other big issue that Robert was talking about in the interview. He said we've failed on immigration. We have to own that. We have to come down and slap far, far harsher curbs, tougher curbs on our borders to just get those numbers right down. I mean, he's talking for a period of net emigration, which is a technical word, but it's basically when fewer people move to the UK than move out. You know, it's been a long time since we've been in that world. Yes, and did you detect any kind of a twinkle in his eye about reform in terms of, you know, we've seen, you know, obviously some defections. We saw the Dean Dorries going over, one of Boris's best friends, and of course we've seen all kinds of other Tory defections. Do you think there's any chance that he might do it at some point? Well, I think currently his sights are probably still with the Tory party. I mean, everyone's talking about him as a possible next leader. I did ask him about the defection of Danny Kruger because I thought that probably would have hit home, because Danny Kruger ran Robert's campaign when he ran for Tory leadership. Right. So these guys are close, they're politically close, and they were personally close. So I did think that might really sting for him. he currently says, look, defections, talk of him defecting far too early. He says they need to kind of fight, win back hearts and minds, and kind of get the Tories back on the playing field of politics again. But, you know, they with poll ratings like that, it's going to be a long, tough road to make a comeback.
It really is. Talking of long, tough roads, it's going to be a pretty long, tough road in Liverpool this weekend, isn't it? You know, Keir Starmer trying to avoid Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, every time anybody asks him, saying, oh, no, I don't want to be Prime Minister, but people keep asking me to do it.
Andy Burnham is showing so much leg on this leadership stuff. He's basically wearing a miniskirt. You look, I mean, it is always fun when you have these rivalries, these civil wars blowing up ahead of Labour conference. My phone was just pinging yesterday morning. I didn't even need to start texting anyone in Labour before they were voluntarily texting me, telling me that a period of silence from Andy Burnham would be most welcome. Right. I think he is absolutely infuriating a lot of the MPs and ministers and kind of staffers in government trying to get on with stuff. Look, Andy Burnham wants to be Labour leader. He's never been shy about it. He's run, twice, lost twice. And he's using his kind of, no doubt, popularity and this reputation he gets to have as being a kind of outsider from Westminster to kind of, you know, to kind of leverage himself. It's going to be tricky for Andy Burnham to ever become Labour leader. Currently, he's going to have to win get a seat, win a by-election, then get nominated. But the fact that people are talking about it, the fact that Labour MPs are talking about it and hatching these sort of plots does speak to just how angry they are with Keir Starmer, how he has sort of lost that loyalty from them already.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's going to be a fascinating scenario at the weekend. I've got an update as well on the channel returns. Apparently, 2 more people have gone back, I think, since yesterday. An Afghan and a Somali going to France under the new one-in, one-out deal. So that means we've got 6 out. And I think in the month of September, 3,180 in. So still quite a big deficit to make up.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we were talking about earlier. It does feel like if you can forget the palm, that drop in the ocean. Look, the state does need to be striking these deals. We do need to be getting those people on planes. We need to prove that the lefty lawyers can't thwart that at every attempt. So there is kind of a judicial issue here to prove. But, you know, you're going to have to make a much bigger dent in these numbers for anyone to really start listening. Yeah, absolutely right. Kate's political lunch dates, where can we find it? When is it out? YouTube. I've tweeted the link. Should be on the Sun website as well. So, yes, on the internet.
Lovely. We should look forward to your next victim, as they say.